All right, so in this video, we're going to look at one of the ideas that defined the 20th century, one of the isms that really defined the 20th century, and that is communism, which was developed by multiple men, but mainly Karl Marx in his Communist Manifesto. And this is going to be one of those ideas, like I said, that defines the 20th century. For most of the 1900s, particularly from World War II to about 1989, the world was kind of divided in half. You had the communist countries and you had the anti-communist countries, such as the United States and Britain. So the development of communism is a big deal historically speaking. So Karl Marx in his Communist Manifesto, he said that all of history is a history of class struggle. For instance, the patricians versus the plebeians in the Roman Empire, or the serfs versus the noble lords in the medieval era. So he said all of history boils down to class struggle. And he said in a modern industrialized country, there are two classes. You have the bourgeoisie. Now, last time we saw that word, that was just the French word for middle class, and it's actually a good thing. But in communist terms, being bourgeoisie is a bad thing. Bourgeoisie means you're like the bad guy. You are the oppressors. You are the people that own what's called the means of production. You own the factories. You own the mines. You own all the land. And you control society. And since you have all the means of production, you have all the money. Therefore, you control the government as well. And you use that power to keep everything the way it is because you like being in power. So in communist terms, being bourgeoisie is not good. The other class is the proletariat. These are your workers. These are your factory workers, the people in the mines, your farmers. You're poor. You're oppressed from a communist viewpoint. So he said in a modern industrialized society, there are only two classes, the bourgeoisie and the proletariat, those who own the means of productions, and then the workers that are oppressed by the bourgeoisie. And Karl Marx said that in these modern industrialized countries, eventually there will be a proletariat revolution, a violent proletariat revolution that will overthrow the bourgeoisie and take over, and a proletariat dictatorship will be created. And that proletariat dictatorship, once they control the means of production, will use their newfound power to eliminate the mechanisms that created the oppression. He argued that once the proletariat, the people basically, own all the means of production, then everyone will be equal. And if everyone is equal, then there are no classes. And if there are no classes, there's going to be world peace, and there won't even be a need for government anymore because government is just a symptom of the bourgeoisie oppression anyway. And once the bourgeoisie aren't oppressing people, there won't be a government anymore. So, to review, all of history is a history of class struggle. In a modern industrialized society, he said there are only two classes, the bourgeoisie, who own the means of production, and the proletariat, the working class oppressed. And he said there will be a proletariat revolution that creates a proletariat dictatorship, but once the means of production are not privately owned anymore, they're owned by everybody, right? Once the means of production are owned by everybody equally, there won't be classes, so there won't be a need for government because government is only a symptom of bourgeoisie oppression anyway. And what we're going to see this semester is multiple communist revolutions take place in different parts of the world, like in China, in Russia, and we're going to see, okay, does communism work? Once there is a proletariat revolution, does that proletariat dictatorship deliver on that promise of a classless society and world peace? Of course, it doesn't. We don't have world peace, and we certainly still have classes in society. But either way, this was very appealing to many in the working class. This idea that you could live in a society in which everyone is equal. And so this leads to the rise of communist and socialist political parties throughout Europe, like in Germany, for instance. And what's interesting is some of these socialist political parties begin to win, fair and square. They begin to win elections. And this leads to a split within the communist movement. A group is created called the revisionists. The root word of that is revise, and revise means to change. So the revisionists make changes to Karl Marx's theory. And Karl Marx said there had to be a violent revolution. Well, here you have socialist political parties winning peacefully, winning elections. So revisionists, they're communists who revise his theory and say, okay, violent revolution might not be necessary. Maybe we can simply win power peacefully. So not all communists are the same. Right? You've got your traditional Marxists who's like, no, we have to have a violent revolution. Then you have your revisionists, which you mainly see in Western Europe because you actually have democracy in Western Europe, saying, no, 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 we can do this peacefully. But then, even if you're not communist, you could be inspired by the idea of workers' rights. And you see the rise of trade unions, right? Workers uniting together to get benefits because they realize the power of strike. See, one worker in a factory demanding a raise doesn't matter. You can fire that worker and replace them. But if all the workers threaten not to work anymore if they don't get a raise or better hours or whatever that they want, if all your workers are threatening to stop work all at the same time, that's a big deal. Because if they all stop working, you, the factory owner, you're not making any money. And yes, you can replace them all, but that's going to take time. Then you got to train all your replacements, which takes even more time. And time is money. Plus, who's going to train the replacement workers if all the other workers have went on strike? So the threat of strikes, right? Workers realizing there's more of us workers than owners, and if we can unite, we can get things done. That is huge. So the working class begin to realize, wait a minute, we outnumber the rich people. And if we can get our act together and if we can unite, we can get things done. Now it's risky because obviously if you go on strike, you're not getting paid. And in the early days, sometimes factory owners would employ essentially criminals, thugs, to show up and beat up the striking workers and intimidate them to go back to work. But if you could stay united, though, if you could stay united, oftentimes that factory owner would cave, would give in, and then you could sit down and begin to negotiate better pay or better hours, or all of the above, or health benefits, or a pension plan, or retirement fund, or safety regulations. There's all kinds of things that you can now demand and negotiate because you can threaten to strike once you unionize.